Greetings. Today we will build our own monitoring system using Grafana and Prometheus. But first, what is Grafana? Grafana is open source visualization and observability platform for metrics, logs, and traces. Connects to many data sources: Prometheus, Loki, Eloxic, InfluxDB, Postgre, cloud monitoring, etc. Used for dashboards, alerting, and troubleshooting across infrastructure and applications. Grafana solves the problem of making complex, scattered telemetry data understandable and actionable, especially for monitoring and observability. Here's a simple example of Grafana configuration. First in this diagram is the data producer. It produces data that you actually want to visualize. It could be the database server, application server, or any server that produces data to visualize. Next is the data source and is connected to the data producer and store its data. For our guide, we will use Prometheus. It will pull data and store it from the data producer. The Grafana server is the front end that visualizes the data. And in order to get the data, Grafana query the data from the data source and display it in Grafana's dashboard. Now let's start to install Grafana. I am using Ubuntu 22.04 for this guide. If your Ubuntu 22.04 is freshly installed, you must update the packages because the pre-installed packages might be outdated and might not work properly with Grafana. We issue a reboot command for packages that need the system to reboot to take effect. Next is to install the dependencies needed to install and run Grafana. Now, let's add the Grafana GPG key and repository where the files will be pulled when it is installed via apt. Now we can install Grafana via apt install command. Once we're finished installing Grafana, we now have to start as a service. And since it is installed as a Linux service, we need to execute systemctl tldem reload to reload the systemd manager configuration. We can now see that Grafana is active and running. Now we need to open a port in our firewall. For the default port that Grafana uses, port 3000 is the default port. Commonly, the installed firewall in Ubuntu is Uncomplicated Firewall, or UFW for short. In case UFW is inactive, execute UFW enable. Now, we can enter in our browser the IP address of our Grafana server, along with port 3000. Now we see the login page. We can now log in using admin as a user and password. Before we can completely log in, Grafana will ask us to change the admin password. Let's do that. In the Grafana homepage, we see two tasks that we need complete: adding a data source and create a dashboard. To install Prometheus, we will go back to our terminal and execute the commands to download and install Prometheus. Now we will create necessary folders for Prometheus and set its proper permission. When done, we can now download the packages of Prometheus and install it into our system. Now we need to update its configuration file. Now we will create its system service and start it as a service so that whenever our system is rebooted or experience a sudden shutdown, it will still start when the system booted up. Now we can see that Prometheus is active and running. We will then open its default port 9090 to our firewall and go back to our browser and access it. Now we can see our front end and see the status of our server. This concludes the installation and setup part of our monitoring system. Next, we will set up our dashboard and add a data producer server to test its data gathering and visualization.